Greetings! I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm building these Flames of War Ersatz Panthers, otherwise known as M10 Panther or sometimes Warcrime Panther. It's a Panther modified to look like an American M10 tank destroyer, which is a war crime. Not that it's a particularly convincing disguise. Here we can see that while the number of parts is pretty high compared to a lot of other Flames of War models, there aren't really a lot of pieces and it should be fairly simple to build. The resin parts of this model are quite nice looking and well cast, with fairly crisp detail. There is a recess in the hull for magnets, but none are included. The tracks, while not horrible, aren't great and they do lack a little bit of detail. There are 2 crew figures included, but I'm not going to use them. The rest of the metal parts are acceptable, but not spectacular. If you've seen any of my modelling videos before, you know that the usual routine is to add magnets first, and then we can get right into working on the hull. I started by checking to see if the tracks would fit properly. As usual with these resin and metal kits, they don't, so I began filing away. Once I'd got what I figured would be a decent fit, it occurred to me that the front mudguard would obstruct the track and be impossible to attach once the tracks were glued on. So I installed the mudguard first. The part itself only needed a tiny bit of cleaning up. I then checked to see how the track would fit with the mudguard. Not great, and so began more filing. A lot more filing. Eventually, I just accepted the huge gap at the front and glued the tracks down. I'm pretty sure that gap isn't meant to be there, but I can fix it with green stuff later if it continues to bother me. The final part of the hull is this side skirt thing, which in pictures of the real thing looks a lot less pronounced. It could be made smaller and cast as part of the hull. It was quite annoying to put on. The one I filmed was fairly straightforward, but the other ones were irritating. They were a little bent and they don't fit right up against the hull. Of course they could be filed down so they do fit a little bit better, but by the time I was putting them on, I'd resigned myself to the fact that there would be huge gaps on this model anyway, and so I began to work on the turret. I was quite amazed that the hatch just fit right into the hole, so I glued that in. Bam! Awesome! The next part, however, was more annoying. This bar that goes across the back of the turret. It was very fiddly and annoying to try and place. I thought the tweezers would help, but I eventually gave up and just got it with my fingers. That part isn't as bad as the gun though. You can't quite see it in the video, but the gun barrel isn't round, it's kind of flattened. Both of the models I have are like this. It's not the worst thing and it's barely noticeable from any distance, but I found it annoying. So I cleaned it up as best as I could and glued it on. And there we have it, a completed Ersatz Panther ready to attempt to fool the Americans. Let's take a look at this next to a model of an M10. Not particularly convincing, is it? Even if it didn't have that big counterweight on the back of the turret, you can see the M10 is much smaller and has much different looking tracks. Perhaps only at extreme range would this work. Oh well, it's kind of cool and really quite interesting. Overall, I'm not super happy with how these turned out. They aren't awful, but the gaps displease me, especially after all the filing I did. I will fix them up with green stuff before painting, and that should make them look a little bit better. I didn't really have the time for that at the time I built these. The kits aren't bad, in fact I have encountered much worse, and I do think they will look very good once I've painted them. Perhaps I can try using some branches or something to hide imperfections. To be fair, I can't complain too much. I did buy these tanks on a whim, simply because I enjoyed playing it in World of Tanks, and they are, after all, gaming pieces, not intended to be perfect scale replicas. Also, they inspired me to check out cool pictures of these tanks and to read about their history, which I found quite interesting. I will eventually get around to painting these tanks. It should be simple enough. The only thing holding me back at the moment is that I don't have any American decals. I suppose I should get on to ordering some of those. I hope this has been helpful or interesting for you. If you'd like to see more, click subscribe. Thanks for watching. Farewell.